The scene opens with the gentle clinking of crystal glasses and the low hum of laughter filling the grand hall of an exclusive five-star restaurant. Chandeliers sparkle overhead, their golden light cascading across the marble floors as elegantly dressed guests mingle among tables adorned with white roses and silver cutlery. Everything seems perfect, the music, the atmosphere, the glamour. Yet beneath the polished surface, tension brews. At the center of it all sits a woman, graceful and poised, her eyes shimmering with both pride and unease. It's her husband's corporate celebration, a night meant to honor his achievements, but somewhere between the smiles and champagne, something in his tone changes. He leans back in his chair, voice loud enough for the table to hear, and begins to mock. Playfully at first, but with words that cut deeper than they should. He jokes about her simple beginnings, about how she oozed to dream too small, and how she wouldn't understand luxury even if it danced in front of her. The crowd laughs, unsure whether to join in or stay silent, and she forces a polite smile to hide the sting in her heart. Every sentence feels like a dagger cloaked in charm, every laugh around her a reminder of the distance growing between them. As the dinner continues, she glances around the room, at the women in their designer gowns, the men discussing business, the waiters moving in silence, and something inside her begins to shift. She realizes that this isn't just a moment of embarrassment, it's a mirror reflecting the truth she has ignored for too long. The man who once promised to protect her now takes pride in belittling her. The humiliation, once unbearable, begins to fuel something powerful within her determination. She straightens her back, her expression calm, but her heart resolute. She knows she won't cry, not here, not tonight. Instead, she will remember this moment. The laughter, the sting, the sparkle of the chandeliers, as the night she decided to reclaim her power and walk away toward a future only she could build. The dinner carries on with elegance and laughter, but beneath the glitter and fine wine, something dark begins to unfold. As servers glide gracefully between tables, pouring champagne into tall, gleaming glasses, the husband's tone starts to shift. It's small at first. A few words laced with sarcasm, comments that seem harmless to others, but land like tiny cuts to the woman sitting beside him. He begins by teasing her about her old-fashioned sense of style, joking that she still shops like she's living in the past. The guests chuckle politely, unsure whether to laugh or stay quiet, but she smiles softly, pretending it doesn't hurt. He continues, emboldened by the attention. "You know," he says with a smirk, "when I first met her, she couldn't even tell a Bordeaux from a Merlot. But look at her now, sipping champagne like she's always belonged." The laughter at the table grows louder, and her cheeks burn with embarrassment. Each remark feels carefully wrapped in humor, yet the intention behind it is sharp and deliberate. She grips her glass a little tighter, feeling her pulse quicken as she forces another smile. Inside, her thoughts spin. How could he do this here in front of everyone? The people around them exchange glances. Some uncomfortable, others amused. One of his business associates tries to change the subject, but her husband isn't finished. He leans closer, voice dripping with mock affection, and says, "You've come a long way, haven't you, dear? I remember when your biggest dream was owning a small bakery. Cute, right? But now you're dining with executives and CEOs. I guess I really upgraded your life." The table erupts again in laughter, but this time it feels colder, emptier. The woman nods slightly, her throat tight, her heart aching. In that moment, she realizes this isn't just teasing. It's a public display of power. He's using her as a prop to elevate himself. As if diminishing her somehow makes him shine brighter. She lowers her gaze for a moment, staring into her glass, the golden bubbles swirling like her thoughts. She remembers the nights she stood by him, encouraging him when business was slow, believing in him when others doubted. Every late night, every sacrifice, every quiet moment of support, all dismissed with a smirk and a careless joke. Her silence confuses him. He expects her to play along, to laugh with the others, but she doesn't. Instead, she sits still, her expression calm, her eyes steady. Behind that calm, however, something begins to change. The sting of humiliation starts to transform into something sharper. Clarity. She realizes this moment, painful as it is revealing who he truly is. And while everyone else at the table sees a man confident enough to joke, she sees the truth, a man insecure enough to mock the very person who once lifted him up. As another toast begins, she raises her glass, but this time not in celebration. She's silently toasting her own awakening. For the first time, She sees that the woman he's belittling, the one with humble roots and quiet strength, is the same woman who will one day walk away from this table and never look back. The laughter grows louder now, echoing through the lavish dining room like a cruel symphony. What started as playful teasing has become something far more cutting, and everyone at the table feels the shift. The husband, emboldened by the attention and the drinks, continues his monologue, unaware or uncaring of the pain flickering in his wife's eyes. He leans back in his chair, his voice smooth but laced with arrogance, performing for his audience as if this were his stage. "You know," he says with a chuckle, "when we got married, she couldn't even balance a checkbook. I had to teach her everything about money. Now she thinks she understands business because she watches a few online videos." A ripple of laughter spreads around the table. A few guests glance at her, their smiles faltering, unsure how to react. Some look down at their plates, embarrassed for her. Others smirk, too polite or too spineless to intervene. She feels the weight of every stare, the pity, the amusement, the judgment. Her husband's words hang in the air, heavy and humiliating. He lifts his wine glass as if he's made a harmless joke, but the sparkle in his eyes reveals a cruel satisfaction. She forces a faint smile, her heart pounding in her chest. Every muscle in her body is tense, every breath deliberate. She knows that reacting emotionally would only feed his ego further. So, she sits still, quiet and composed, her silence more powerful than any retort. Inside, though, something breaks. The man she once loved, the man she once defended, supported, and believed in, has turned her into the punchline of his success story. The guests try to move on, but he doesn't stop. "You should have seen her back then," he says, gesturing toward her with his fork. "She thought owning a small cafe would make her successful. Meanwhile, I was building a business empire. But hey, every king needs a dreamer beside him, right?" He laughs again, taking another sip, oblivious to the fact that he's slowly destroying the respect left between them. Her eyes flicker toward the waiter standing nearby, who avoids eye contact but clearly hears everything. The humiliation burns deeper, not just because of what he said, but because of where he chose to say it, in front of colleagues, friends, and strangers. This was no longer about jokes or pride. It was about control. He wanted to show everyone that he was above her, that she was dependent on him, that her worth existed only in the shadow of his success. But as he speaks, a quiet realization begins to take root within her. She looks at him, not with anger, but with clarity. For the first time, she sees the man behind the polished smile, insecure, shallow, desperate for validation. She no longer feels small. She feels awake. The laughter around her fades into a distant murmur, and in her mind, a single thought crystallizes. "This will be the last time he ever mocks me in public." She exhales slowly, her posture straightening, her face calm and unreadable. He mistakes her silence for submission, but in truth, it is the calm before the storm. The moment she decides that tonight will mark the end of her humiliation and the beginning of her independence. The music in the background plays softly, but for her, it feels distant, muted beneath the thundering pulse of her heart. The laughter, the chatter, the flickering candlelight, all of it begins to blur into one dull haze. She's no longer listening to the conversation at the table, she's listening to herself. The words of her husband still echo in her mind, sharp and unforgiving, but they no longer sting the same way. Instead, they harden into resolve. For years, she had endured the small insults, the patronizing tone, the way he made her feel less whenever he needed to feel more. Tonight, something inside her finally snaps, not in anger, but in awakening. She looks around the table one more time, seeing not friends, but witnesses. Some avoid her gaze out of discomfort, others with quiet pity. It doesn't matter. She's already made her decision. The room feels suffocating, the laughter now almost cruel in its emptiness. Her husband, still wrapped up in his own performance, doesn't notice the shift in her demeanor, the stillness in her eyes, the calm in her breathing. To him, this is just another night where his ego reigns and she stays silent. But this time, she's not silent out of weakness, she's silent because she's done. She places her napkin gently on the table, the soft rustle breaking through the hum of conversation. A few heads turn as she pushes back her chair, the sound of the legs scraping lightly against the marble floor. Her husband pauses mid-sentence, his grin fading slightly as he looks up. "Where are you going?" he asks, half amused, half annoyed, his voice dripping with disbelief. She meets his gaze for a long moment, steady, unwavering, and then simply says, My real home. The one I'll build for myself. Her voice isn't loud, but it carries through the air with the quiet authority of a woman who has finally found her strength. The table falls silent. The clinking of cutlery stops. Conversations freeze. A few guests glance nervously between them, unsure whether to intervene or stay still. Her husband chuckles awkwardly, trying to mask his shock with another attempt at humor. "Oh, come on. Don't be dramatic," he says, waving a dismissive hand. But she doesn't flinch, doesn't argue, doesn't even look back. She lifts her clutch, turns and begins to walk toward the exit. Each step feels like shedding a layer of pain. Each stride a declaration of freedom. Behind her, he calls out again, his voice rising slightly now, tinged with something new, fear. "You'll come back," he says, almost as if to convince himself. But she doesn't answer. The heavy doors of the restaurant open, letting in a cool gust of night air that washes over her face. The stars outside glimmer faintly, and for the first time in a long while, she breathes deeply, free, unshaken, alive. In that moment, she isn't walking away from him, she's walking toward herself. The humiliation, the years of belittlement, the silence, all of it ends at that door. She doesn't know exactly what lies ahead, but she knows one thing for sure. She will never again let anyone define her worth. Tonight is the end of her old life and the first step toward the empire she will one day build. With grace, courage, and the dignity no one can ever take from her again. The first morning after she left felt strangely quiet. No more distant footsteps echoing through the marble hallway. No murmurs of phone calls she wasn't meant to hear. No forced smiles over breakfast. Just silence and peace. For the first time in years, she didn't feel small. She stood by the window of her tiny rented apartment, the sunlight pouring in through the thin curtains, and realized she wasn't lost, she was free. The world outside suddenly looked different, alive, full of possibilities she had long forgotten she could reach for. That morning, she didn't cry. Instead, she made a promise to herself. Never again would she depend on anyone who tried to dim her light. The first few weeks weren't easy. The comfort and luxury she had once known were gone. There were nights when she lay awake, wondering if she had made a mistake, but every doubt was met with a stronger truth: she had survived worse. Humiliation, manipulation, loneliness behind golden walls. This was not her downfall, it was her rebirth. She began by revisiting the passion she once buried under the weight of someone else's dreams. Her love for design, her creativity, her ability to make something beautiful out of nothing. She started sketching again, creating ideas for handcrafted items that reflected resilience and elegance. One afternoon, while sipping coffee in a small cafe, she overheard a conversation between two women about the struggle of finding authentic, handmade products with meaning. Something clicked inside her. She went home and stayed up all night writing a plan. A business that wasn't just about selling things, but about telling stories of strength, growth, and self-worth. The name came easily: Rise Studio. It wasn't grand, but it was hers. She poured everything into it, her savings, her energy, her heart. The early days were brutal. Orders were slow, and there were times she doubted whether anyone cared about what she was creating. But she kept going. She posted her designs online, shared her journey, her story, her lessons. And slowly, people began to respond, not just with purchases, but with messages of admiration and inspiration. Her story became her strength, and her strength became her brand. Months turned into a year, and her small studio began to grow beyond what she ever imagined. Influencers started featuring her work, publications wanted to interview her, and her designs became symbols of empowerment. The same woman who once sat silent at a table full of laughter now spoke on stages, inspiring others to believe in their worth. Her husband had mocked her dreams once, calling them small and naive. But as she stood one day in her own office, sunlight gleaming across walls adorned with her achievements, she smiled, knowing that every insult had only built her determination. This was her turning point, the moment she chose courage over comfort, purpose over pride. She didn't just rebuild her life, she reinvented it. And for the first time, she truly understood what it meant to win, not over him, but over her fears. The rise didn't happen overnight. It was built in silence, with sleepless nights and early mornings, fueled by coffee, determination, and the quiet fire of a woman who refused to give up. Each day, she worked harder than the one before, learning, experimenting, and perfecting her craft. Her small studio became her sanctuary, filled with sketches, fabric samples, notes, and a vision too strong to fail. There were no shortcuts, no easy paths, just persistence and faith. While others rested, she worked. While others doubted, she believed. At first, the challenges felt endless. Some days, orders didn't come in at all. Suppliers delayed shipments. Customers canceled last minute, and bills piled up faster than income. But instead of breaking her, those moments carved her strength deeper. She remembered her husband's mocking laughter at that dinner table and turned it into motivation. Every setback became a spark. Every obstacle reminded her of why she started. To prove to herself that she could stand on her own. That she didn't need anyone to define her worth. She took every opportunity to learn, watching tutorials, reading business books, studying marketing strategies, and reaching out to mentors who believed in her vision. Slowly, her brand began to take shape. Her designs were unique, her story authentic, and her message powerful. Customers began sharing her work online, talking about how her products made them feel strong, independent, and valued. She realized that her business wasn't just about selling, it was about connecting, inspiring, and empowering. One day, a well-known influencer stumbled across her page and featured her brand in a post titled, "The Woman Who Turned Heartbreak into an Empire." Within hours, her inbox exploded. Orders poured in from across the country. Her website crashed from heavy traffic, and her small studio could barely keep up. But she didn't panic. She organized, planned, and expanded. She hired a small team, mostly women like her, those who had been underestimated or overlooked. Together, they grew Rise Studio from a home-based idea into a thriving business with heart and purpose. With success came new challenges, competition, pressure, expectations. But she handled them with the same calm strength that had carried her through heartbreak. She learned to lead, to delegate, to trust herself. Her story began appearing in local newspapers, and soon, invitations to speak at business events followed. The same people who once pitied her now admired her. The same voice that had once stayed silent now inspired thousands. Every milestone, every sale, every achievement was a silent victory over the woman she used to be afraid, silenced, dependent. She no longer needed validation from anyone, least of all the man who once mocked her dreams. Her success wasn't about revenge anymore, it was about rebirth. Standing in her new office, overlooking a city that once felt too big to conquer, she finally allowed herself to feel proud. Her empire wasn't built from wealth or privilege. It was built from pain, resilience, and faith. The woman who once walked away from humiliation had risen beyond it. Her success wasn't just in the numbers. It was in the peace she carried and the life she created on her own terms. The moment her company's success became undeniable, the world around her seemed to shift. What had once been a dream built from quiet nights and whispered hopes was now a reality so bright it even startled her. Her designs were featured in luxury magazines, her products displayed in high-end stores, and her name began circulating in business circles as the woman who rose from nothing. Investors who once ignored her were now calling, eager to collaborate. Her brand had become more than a business. It was a symbol of resilience, of reinvention, of how grace and determination could build an empire from ashes. Money began to flow in, not as a symbol of greed, but as validation of years of struggle. She remembered when she used to check her bank account and wonder how to make rent. Now, she reviewed financial reports with confidence, negotiating deals that once would have terrified her. But even with the fortune growing around her, she stayed grounded. Every dollar reminded her of the night she walked away from that dinner table, humiliated but unbroken. Every milestone whispered the same truth. She had built this herself. Her lifestyle changed, yes. She bought a new home, elegant yet simple, filled not with luxury for show but comfort for peace. She traveled, met people who inspired her, and learned from leaders who admired her strength. Yet she never forgot the version of herself who once cried quietly in the dark, wondering if she'd made the right choice. That woman, she knew, had given her everything. Her courage, her fire, her heart. Without that pain, this triumph would never have existed. Then one afternoon, as she prepared for a televised interview about her success, she received a call. The voice on the other end was familiar, hesitant, uncertain. It was her husband. His business, once flourishing, had faltered. His investments had gone wrong. His name no longer carried the same weight it once did. There was no arrogance in his tone now, only desperation. "I've been going through a hard time," he said quietly, the words trembling. "Maybe we could talk." She listened in silence, her heart steady. Not angry, not vengeful, just calm. The fortune she had built had given her more than wealth. It had given her peace, clarity, and power. She realized she didn't need revenge or validation anymore. Life had already settled the score. "I wish you well," she said gently, "but I've already moved on." It was the most expensive sentence she had ever spoken. Not because of money, but because of what it represented: freedom. After the call ended, she stood by her window, looking out at the skyline glittering in the evening light. That fortune, once unimaginable, had changed everything, not by making her richer, but by proving that true wealth comes from resilience, dignity, and self-belief. She had built not just a business, but a legacy, a life that could never again be defined by anyone else's laughter. And as the city lights shimmered before her, she smiled, finally at peace with both her past and the woman she had become. It happened on a quiet evening during a charity gala hosted in the same hotel where her husband once mocked her years ago. Life had a way of coming full circle, and as she stepped through the glittering doors dressed in a sleek, elegant gown, the atmosphere felt eerily familiar. The chandeliers glimmered, the music was soft and sophisticated, and the tables were filled with people whispering her name with admiration. She had been invited as a guest of honor, recognized for her contribution to empowering women in business. But that night, fate had arranged more than an award. It had arranged a reckoning. Across the room, she saw him. Her husband. Or rather, the man he used to be to her. Time had not been kind. His once confident demeanor had faded into wariness, his posture slightly hunched, his laughter forced. He noticed her almost instantly, his expression freezing in disbelief. For a moment, neither moved. The air between them was heavy with memories, painful, distant, and unfinished. He approached slowly, the crowd parting slightly as he did. "You look incredible," he said finally, his voice hesitant, his charm subdued. "It's been a long time," she smiled politely, calm and composed. "Yes, it has." The words were simple, but beneath them lay an ocean of things left unsaid. He looked around at the banners with her company's logo, the reporters waiting nearby, and the people greeting her with respect. It hit him, all at once. The woman he once belittled had become everything he had pretended to be. "I've followed your journey," he continued, trying to sound casual. "You've done remarkably well for yourself." His tone carried a hint of pride, but she could hear the regret buried beneath it. "I didn't realize how strong you really were." She met his gaze steadily, her eyes neither cold nor forgiving, just clear. "You didn't want to see it," she replied softly. "Strength doesn't disappear because someone else refuses to recognize it." There was silence. Around them, the event continued. But for that moment, they existed in their own quiet bubble. He sighed, his shoulders sinking. "I was wrong," he admitted. "About everything. You deserved more than I gave you. He stopped, searching for words. "I don't know how to fix it." She shook her head gently. "You don't have to fix it," she said. "It's already been fixed by me." He looked away, his eyes glistening slightly under the warm light. The realization that he could never undo what he had lost settled heavily on his face. She didn't gloat or lecture, she didn't need to. Her success, her peace, her composure. All of it spoke louder than any revenge ever could. After a moment, she extended her hand. "Take care of yourself," she said kindly. He hesitated, then shook it, his grip weak and trembling. As she turned to leave, the same waiter who once served them years ago opened the door for her. History had repeated itself, but this time, she wasn't the woman walking out in pain. She was the woman walking out in power, grace, and freedom. The confrontation wasn't about anger. It was about closure. And as she stepped into the night air, she knew she had finally won the most important victory of all, peace within herself. As she walked out of the gala that night, the cool breeze brushed against her face, carrying with it the faint sound of laughter and music from inside. But she didn't look back. The woman who once walked away from that same kind of room, humiliated and broken, was now leaving with her head high and her heart full. Life had come full circle, not through revenge, but through growth. She finally understood that success isn't about proving others wrong. It's about proving yourself right. She paused outside beneath the glow of the city lights, taking a deep breath as a quiet smile spread across her lips. Every pain, every insult, every sleepless night had led her here, to this moment of peace and fulfillment. The journey hadn't been easy, it was carved through heartache, perseverance, and faith. But she had learned that when the world underestimates you, it's not your job to fight for recognition. It's your job to rise, to build, to shine. Because real strength doesn't demand attention. It simply commands respect through action. She thought back to that night years ago, sitting at a dinner table surrounded by laughter that wasn't hers. If only that version of herself could see her now, the woman who refused to be defined by cruelty, who turned pain into purpose, and who built not just wealth, but legacy. The fortune, the fame, the respect, all of it was only a reflection of something deeper, the unbreakable belief that she was enough all along. As the driver opened the car door, she glanced once more at the glittering skyline and whispered softly, "Thank you for breaking me. It's how I found my strength." With that, she stepped in, calm and content. Because the real victory wasn't in walking away or in building an empire, it was in rediscovering herself. Her story was no longer about what she lost, but what she became. And that, she knew, was the most powerful ending of all.